we are in the middle of this week-long process. We have been gathering information, gathering opinions, getting feedback on what we've drawn from those who've either came last month to our workshop or some who've came Monday night. Others have been coming every day, Monday, Tuesday, today. So we thank you if you're here for the first time, and we thank you if you're here for the third time, because really we are evolving this as we go. And one of the things you'll notice is that the drawings don't always coordinate with each other because we've got multiple iterations going, and people are, in a sense, doing different things. So this is, I mentioned before, a creative process where it's like if you're a conductor of an orchestra, you know, you're dealing with all of these really talented musicians. Typically, you already have the music, and so you're going from there. But imagine if the musicians were kind of writing the music as they went along. So that's kind of what we're doing here. So that's where we are. Let's go to the next slide. So again, I'm going to repeat some slides from last time, and some of this is for the new people. So you know, right outside this wall, right outside this room, is the lobby of this building has kind of a series of panels that describe the history of Diamondbar. And we think of this activity, what we're doing tonight, as hopefully worthy of a panel in some day in the future, because it is a fundamentally different idea about these 45 acres of Diamondbar. And that's all it is, 45 acres. But that will potentially be different than the way they are today, and really bring a sense of what it means to have a town center. Next. Again, this is the site. This is just outlined in red. It is darker. The rest of the area is grayed out, so to speak. You can see it's just south of the 60 freeway, and the 57 is shooting off to the north. Where at the other end is Golden Springs Drive, centering on Diamondbar Boulevard. Next. And some aerial views. You know, this is suburbia. This is suburbia pretty much everywhere across the United States. The only difference between this suburb and an East Coast suburb is the trees are different, and there usually aren't mountains on the East Coast ones, but in the distance. So otherwise, it's pretty similar. This is a model that served its purpose very well for decades that it existed. But increasingly, we're seeing a market for places that aren't separated by land use, which this one is. In other words, this is all retail, only retail. There's a hotel. No one lives in these 45 acres, right? That's not possible. But in the new plan, yes, they can live. They can live, they could work, they can shop, they can recreate. They can do all those things. They're going to hopefully find a place that's as nice to walk, even nicer to walk than to drive. We'll see, but that's the goal, right? There are a number of reasons for that, but mostly because it lives better. This is what folks want these days. Not all folks, some folks don't, but a lot of younger people do, to be sure. A lot of retailers want that kind of environment, particularly food and beverage providers, because folks like to go to a place that doesn't just serve them food, but is kind of a place. One of the things we've heard from many people in Diamondbar is that there really aren't that many great restaurants in Diamondbar. And so what's happening, and it's not because there isn't a good market for it here, there is. Diamondbar has the demographics skew well above average of the area, of LA County in particular, but even of the area. It also skews older than the area. So it's an affluent population that goes out and spends money at restaurants, but they're not doing it here. They're doing it in other cities because they don't have the choices they want here. Next. There are a few aspects of the site that, in a sense, we're handed. These are facts on the ground that are significant. One of them is that we have several steep slopes that are there, and that has to do with how the topography was manipulated when they built the shopping centers originally, and left us, particularly with around a 14-foot drop across this area. That's not something we can easily navigate in a car or on a wheeled vehicle, and historically hasn't been navigated at all except with a kind of little back stair, but is something that we'd like to see if we can improve on next. So, back in a month ago, we had a workshop, and we prepared this list of goals, and we asked for comments. And so far, these goals have stood up. Nobody has said these are not good goals. I'm going to repeat them again, because they really are the operating kind of philosophy behind what we're doing here. In some respects, I think we were selected to do this because of our commitment to these kind of goals and our experience with working with them, but I also think that they align with what the city has in mind based on the general plan. Make it a great town, make the town center a great neighborhood with a sense of place. When we talk about neighborhood, we mean a place that you can, all those things, you can live, you can work, you can shop, can be a diversity of people in there, a diversity of incomes, a diversity of ages. So make sure that the physical design of the place and the programming supports health and well-being. Now, historically, health and well-being was not one of the things urban designers really talked about very much. It wasn't sort of in our bailiwick. I mean, health is something you go to the hospital or the doctor for, right? But, we've come to understand that, in fact, the physical design of our environment actually has a huge impact on our health. Make the place walkable. That goes back to the health part, right? That's a big part of making a place healthy. Have people walk. When we all go to gyms and spend all this money, and we have, Fitbits and things that measure our steps, because, we're not sure that we can get those steps. But if you live in a walkable environment, you may have a Fitbit to do that, but frankly, you're probably getting it. You're probably noticing every day you're hitting your goal, because it's just a normal part of living. Now, this is, again, only 45 acres, so we're not going to transform everything, but we can make this area, the community, the developers, the owners, everybody that has a stake in this can be a part of that. Provide for a car light or car optional. That does not mean no cars. It means a choice to not use the car when you don't need to. Maybe because you can bike or e-bike or scooter or walk or whatever. It means you use the car when you need a car, but you don't use it for everything because you prefer to do something else. What's being noticed is that a lot of people, particularly younger people, although not exclusively, actually like that choice of being able to own a car if they want, but not always have to use it. Great public places, parks, regenerative landscapes. To be in a town center means to be in a place, to be with other people. It doesn't mean just to shop. It doesn't mean just to work or live. It means to be somewhere where you might enjoy just sitting on a bench and watching others, or watching some children play, or running into a friend, meeting a friend for drinks or coffee, or just running into somebody you met 5 years ago and you saw them again. Accommodate a range of densities, housing types, and levels of affordability. Well, great neighborhoods have that. They accommodate more than one type. This is not just a place for 25 to 30-year-olds, right, who before they've had kids. I mean, historically, that's been some of the demographic that has lived in places like this, but we hope to reach more than that. Partly because we need to get a certain number of affordable housing. The city is committed to that in their obligations for affordable housing with the state. We think that there's an opportunity for some townhomes and home ownership. So maybe you live here when you're 25, and then you make some money, you have money to make a house payment, and you like it so much that you want to stay. It's just nice if you have that opportunity. provide flexibility for the future. This is so critical, particularly for the retail and commercial space, but how many of you 3 years ago, how many of you predicted COVID and that we'd be at our homes for a year and a half? If anybody said yes, then I'm going to Las Vegas with you. But I'm guessing none of you did, and that's why we need flexibility. You know, there's been a huge change in how we use retail space. Everybody knows this. Every retailer knows this. Most of us buy some stuff online. Some of us buy a lot of stuff online, right? But we still go to retail, but it changes all the time. What was, you know, how many of you go to video stores anymore? You know, the LA County zoning ordinance still regulates horse feed stores where you can buy horse feed. Like, it's still in the zoning ordinance. A lot of places you can't buy horse feed. I'm sure most people don't need to, but it's still in there. So, and it might be in here because you had horses out here at some point. So, you know, things have to things change. Footprint sizes change. The way we use space changes. 15 years ago, every Target store was about 90,000 to 125,000 square feet. Now they have these mini Targets, city Targets, or urban Targets. They're like 15 to 30,000, right? That's, again, something I don't think Target would have predicted 15 years ago. And of course, it's got to be developable in phases. Unlike a master plan for a blank field or even a shopping center that is owned by one entity, we've got 23 owners here. 23 separate landowners, which is a lot. And they're not all going to jump at the same time. Some probably won't jump at all. And we've got to be able to accommodate that phasing, which frankly is unpredictable. Next. Oh, that's the 23 landowners. There's the map of them, color-coded. We have reached out, I think, and talked to about 18 or 19 of them. We've tried all 23. Some are difficult to reach. A couple are difficult to find. We're trying. We haven't given up. You know, we're doing our best. So we're reaching out. We get all kinds of responses as to levels of interest in, you know, doing something, redeveloping, whatever. And I think there's a lot of wait and see, to be sure. But, you know, no one is against, no one would say, oh, I don't want to see anything happen. Not one developer that we talked to, or not one owner we talked to said, no, don't do anything. I can tell you that. Next. What we're trying to do is develop a plan that allows folks to work together so that they see that, you know, the old expression about all ships rising in a high tide, that by working together, by collaborating with adjacent landowners, either through whatever deal structure they make, a joint venture of some sort or what else, they can all, you know, do well. You know, we just showed some examples of let me say, peer communities that people like, or nearby communities. I wouldn't necessarily say they're peer, but most of them are actually considerably older. Though Brea, this is actually pretty new. This is a redevelopment, but there was one owner, so that made it a little bit simpler. But the others are essentially old towns, right? That have a certain character to them that people cherish. They love them. They never go out of style. They might deteriorate at times, but then they come back. You know, the suburban paradigm that we're used to now, when it deteriorates, it generally gets torn down. But, you know, there was a time when Pasadena wasn't the place everybody ran to. And, but of course it was beloved and was beautiful architecture and beautiful spaces. And so now it's this phenomenal place. So, you know, trying to learn those lessons. Next. So we just compared the site of Diamondbar Town Center with these other areas, right? And these are just the same outline of Diamondbar Town Center, literally outlining above Monrovia or Chino Hills or Claremont or Brea or Pasadena. just to see the patterns. And one of the things you see is this kind of a grid that sort of shows up, right, one way or the other, because traditional cities were basically developed as a grid. And as simple and as almost dumb as this kind of grid is, it's an amazingly powerful tool to organize cities because it allows different owners, different folks to do whatever it is they do on their block or their parcel, but for the grid to actually organize and keep things together. So that's very powerful. The other thing a grid does is it provides a lot of intersections. What we call intersection density is a great thing for making a walkable community. Because when you have a lot of streets and a lot of intersections, you don't have that far to walk to get to an intersection to be able to cross the street as a pedestrian. Moreover, no one street has to do all of the work because you have multiple streets. So you can spread the traffic out more, get a lot of capacity without necessarily having streets that are ridiculously wide, which are not friendly to cross. Next. So we make this little diagram of what makes a great place, what makes a great neighborhood with a sense of place. And just, I'm going to read this. Place creation is the science and the art of bringing together land use, public realm architecture, and programming centered on people and community in an urbane and walkable form that allows each to maximize its contribution to create a vibrant and beloved destination. It's made out of architecture, a public realm or public space, the uses, the different land uses, and the kinds of things that go on a daily basis, the programming, farmers markets and art shows and bands and concerts and things like that. Next. So again, we said make it walkable. The things that make it walkable, sidewalks are nice, but they're not enough, right? And I'll get into that in a second. You want to have, obviously, different land uses because you have to have something to walk to. Connections. It has to be easy to connect. Obviously, good sidewalks, but good sidewalks, very generous sidewalks with shade. A sense of enclosure. We humans are an edge-loving species. We like edges. We evolved that way. It protects us, right? Because unlike some other animals that have other senses that can detect threats, we're mostly our eyes and ears for threats. So we use other things to help. That's how we evolved. We like those edges. We like sidewalks that are bounded by buildings, particularly if they're interesting buildings, that they reveal detail at the speed of 3 miles an hour, which is how fast humans walk, right? The suburban environment is designed for people traveling about 25 to 35 miles an hour, which is a very different experience. Okay, intersection density I mentioned, and then minimizing surface parking. That's the killer. You need parking, but nobody wants to walk through a parking lot. It's hot, it's dry, it's boring, it's just miserable. Next. So here's our Diamondbar situation today. We've color-coded what we believe is the sidewalk quality, with green being good. There's one small little Torito Lane. There's a little sidewalk in front of the townhouses there. You may not know it if you haven't been back there, but it's very nice. Red means it doesn't exist. The sidewalks don't exist, so obviously not good quality. And the orange is sort of not so good. It's the kind of, it exists, but no one would use that sidewalk unless they had to. They have no other choice. Next. So these are just some of the photos that exist around, some of the connections. Some of them are, pleasant enough. Some are downright dangerous. This is the bike lane right now. I would not ride in this bike lane. I am sure there are a few people who do. But A, there is no buffer between fast-moving cars and the bike. And B, you're literally straddling the gutter pan and the asphalt, which is a guarantee for tripping over into the, it's like not good. So, okay, got to fix that. There's a stairway connecting that upper level and the lower level, the 14 feet, but it's kind of hidden, it's kind of narrow. probably not something people use very often. So next. So great sidewalks. I'm going to focus on the one on the left. People pay lots of money to visit Santa Barbara. From all over the world they go there. Oh, it's all the beautiful Spanish architecture, of course, but it's not just that. It's the sense of place. And that sense of place comes not just from the buildings that are vertical. Look at this. You can barely see the buildings in this photograph. It still looks like a nice place. Look at the size of this sidewalk. Look what's going on this sidewalk. There are people sitting at a cafe, people shopping, parking their bikes. There's lots of landscape. There's a nice paving material. There's amenities and trash cans. And when this was taken, there were newspaper boxes, different kinds of trees here. There are balconies hanging off the buildings, blade signs that kind of come out and hold your interest as you walk by. That sign is not for the car. That sign's for the pedestrian. The car will never see that sign. The green awnings that provide additional shade and detail. That's what makes it a fabulous place. Next. I just wanted to compare the idea of minimize the surface parking. And again, minimize surface parking doesn't mean there's no parking. It just means putting it in garages of some sort. The statistic I said was 9% is the goal. Pasadena is at 5%. So it's like above the goal. Claremont and Monrovia are close at 15% for Claremont and 13% for Monrovia. Chino Hills, a little bit up there at 31%, Brea at 20%, Diamondbar at 41% parking. So 40% of the land of the town center right now is made up of parking. That is a lot. All right, that's the opportunity. Next. It's a giant land bank. Next. We've got some other, let me say, challenges or constraints. We've got, I think a big one is Diamondbar Boulevard. It's a very busy road with traffic that's usually moving at some speed except at two intersections that feels very difficult to cross. And it's hard to imagine a town center that straddles this roadway as it is right now. I mean, you could maybe make two small town centers, but they really wouldn't connect very easily. There's the steep slopes that we mentioned in several places. There's actually another street that's called, I keep forgetting the name, Prospector, right? That comes under the freeway, but doesn't allow access to the site. There's literally a chain link fence there. People have managed to kick the fence down at times. It gets repaired, I'm sure. But, you know, it's kind of an aspirational access there. So, you know, this, I said the last time, I'll say it again, this Diamondbar Boulevard, we've drawn it almost like a little zipper there, and right now it's kind of unzipped, and we'd like to zip it back together. So, next. So, let's talk about Diamondbar Boulevard. Oh, no, I'm sorry, wait a minute, this is, you keep going, I don't know why this is in this spot. It's probably in the wrong. So, let's talk about some of the other opportunities. I mentioned some of these other cities we looked at had, essentially they're made out of a grid of streets. And in fact, there is a kind of latent grid that already exists at these two shopping centers. It's in the drive aisles, it's in the curb cuts from the streets, it's in the fire lanes that go across. You can start to see that grid start to exist. So what if you just, that's a sort of, use that as a natural starting point. Next. I mentioned that stair. Here's another opportunity, you know, that you saw a picture of that little stair that navigated between the high point and the low point of the sites. Not low, but lower point of the site that goes down 14 feet. And there's a stair, and I mentioned that I don't think anybody uses it, but it doesn't have to be that way, right? This is in Rome. People travel all over the world to go to Rome, and they definitely take pictures on those steps, right? The Spanish steps, they're called. The space is almost as much about the stairs as it is about what's at the top and the bottom of the stairs. In fact, you're welcome to sit on the stairs. You're welcome to loiter on the stairs. It's encouraged. This is another stair, a little less grand, but quite nice. This happens to be in Paris. Again, just connecting two areas that aren't connected because of severe topography. A nice wide stair, buildings looking out to those stairs. You feel like you're on a street or in public when you're on those stairs. Here's one right here in LA, right? Now, you're not encouraged to loiter on these stairs. They will actually tell you to not loiter on these stairs, which is too bad, I think, because it would be better if people were sitting on that stairs instead of it being empty. And there's a lot of them. There's 110 of them. I walk them quite often to get my steps. And it connects down to the public library at the bottom, which is very nice. So next. So what do we do about all these conditions? So what about Diamondbar Boulevard? So we asked the question the other night, what do you think about that? And we got people to put up all kinds of notes. There's lots of notes here, as you can see, and more are welcome. So we took that into account. Next. We also took into account, and I'm sorry it's a little blurry. This was sort of a picture. I took this picture with my iPhone, so I'm going to get the original file. This is a bike feasibility study that's been done. I'm not even sure who did this plan. Who did, Greg, who did this? You have an idea? Okay, it came from somebody in your office, but I don't remember who gave it to us, and I don't know who actually was the author of it. But it has to do with a whole set of proposed bike facilities that somebody is proposing somewhere, okay? So it's the only thing I got at the moment. But what's interesting about it is that the blue, which represents sort of existing bike facilities, and it actually is Golden Springs and Diamondbar. So like right there. So those are existing bike facilities, but you can see that the bike facility that's there, as I pointed out, is not such a good bike facility. But it seems to me this is important because especially if look at this entire aspirational diagram of what it could be. Wow, and these are like the trunk lines. So that seems like a big deal. Next. Same, what about Golden Springs? What could it become? Again, it is a bike lane now. There's a bike lane, it's not that, but not what's pictured here, but could it be something better? Next. And then we also asked, for other opportunities that people thought of. And again, we see,
Top left.
it's this one, right? Yeah, go to the next slide. Well, you can come up and read all these. I just put this up for, to show you. A lot of people have thoughts about this. A lot. Which is incredibly encouraging. Because that alone speaks to the pent-up desire for a public realm, right? About what they want for this place. And it's so encouraging that, and it's everything. I mean, it's like amazingly diverse things, from the most detailed, a water bottle refill station. I think that's perfectly reasonable and probably doable, right? Live theater, well, that's a bigger lift to get, right? But, okay, I mean, the fact that they're all there is really wonderful. And who knows? Next. And then, other opportunities were asked. We asked folks, find other opportunities. And you can see, not as many people have commented, but still some good response. So that's all been going on this week. And hopefully will continue to go on. Next. And then we also commissioned, or as part of our team, I should say, RCLCO, who are one of the nation's premier independent real estate market analysts, did the market study. And this was their initial findings. There are some questions that we have, the city has, that this is not ready for prime time yet, but it is good enough that we can say we make certain observations. One is, there is a pretty big market for residential here. And it breaks down, this is over 2,000 units. It breaks down, as you can see, market rate apartments, affordable units, for sale units, senior housing, right? So one of the big issues that we all have to deal with here, particularly the council, is that right now the general plan is written for an average density of 20 units an acre, which roughly comes out to about 900 units on the entire site. So well, there are several problems there. One is that's not enough to get the kind of activated place that we're trying to get here. It's just not enough people, not enough bodies living above these stores. Second, city has a requirement to provide a certain number of affordable housing units here, and that's not going to happen unless there is enough market rate units to help essentially buy down some of that requirement, either to pay in lieu fees or to build some additional, et cetera. So that's number two, and 900 is just not enough. Number three, 20 units an acre is not enough of an incentive for most of the landowners that we've talked to do anything. It's just not enough. They're making money now. Sure, they would like to make more money, but 20 units an acre and all the hassle that comes with it, nah. So this is a challenge. This is a question for the council in the end. You know, this is showing slightly more than double that number as a market. It doesn't mean you have to do that, but it does suggest more than 20 units an acre. I don't know what that number is, and it'll be something we have to discuss. Next. Oh, I go back. They also found a market for roughly 446,300 square feet, which sounds very specific, except when you realize what is there now. Occupied, 446,119 square feet, which I don't know why they raised it by 100 and some feet, but there it is. So there's actually about 500,000 square feet of space, but about 54,000 of it isn't occupied. So that's what we've got. Now, some of it is occupied by not necessarily the highest and best uses. So while the market isn't necessarily for a larger amount of retail, it is for a higher quality retail and more food and beverage. Again, the demographics support that. Next. Basically, this is about keeping some of the money that's leaking into neighboring communities in Diamondbar. As far as housing types, what does it mean to say more units? It could mean any of these types, from row houses to townhouses to stacked flats, 3 or 4 stories, that kind of. We're not talking high rises here, and we're not talking single family houses here. But we are talking about apartments over flat or retail. We're talking about maybe live work or other forms like that. Next. Okay, so now what have we been doing besides collecting all this money? We've been testing things. We've been asking what if. Now, I don't know if anybody's from the press here or anything, but none of these things that you're going to see are like cooked. These are what designers do. We test things. And because of this process, we're testing it in the open. So you're at a restaurant, the chefs are there, and they're trying dishes on you on the spot. And, you know, they're not sure if they're ready to serve these yet. That's what's going on. Okay, so this is sort of a model, a digital model of what's there, of, you know, the site. Next. And this happens to be walking down Diamondbar Boulevard. Now, this is what I mean by no one would walk here unless they had no choice. It's not comfortable. It's narrow. There are literally lampposts in the middle of the sidewalk, right? I mean, so this is not unusual, by the way. You can see this everywhere. I've seen places where the sidewalk is only that wide and there's a lamppost where you literally have to get into the gutter to walk around the post. I've seen that in cities. So, you know, it's what it is, because when we built this road, like most of them like it, pedestrian was like an afterthought. We'll provide a sidewalk, but nobody thought there would be many pedestrians. And why would there be? It's uncomfortable, it's dangerous, etc. Oh, and there's the bike lane. See, there it is. Okay. We wondered if there was another way to look at this street. And we recognize, let me say this. We started this exercise by looking at the current traffic conditions. And what we discovered, we didn't do this. We have another team member, Gibson Transportation Consulting. And what they discovered was there is not a capacity problem on this street. There is an intersection problem on this street in 2 places, not a capacity problem. In fact, there's excess capacity on the through street. It's just at 2 intersections, one of which, of course, is at Golden Springs Drive. So what if we could take advantage of that excess capacity, but also not hurt and possibly help the intersection? Next. Now, I should say, so I'm going to show you how we got to this, but here's more or less a similar place, right, as imagined by Chaiwat, half an hour ago. This was, at this point, all right? It doesn't look like Diamondbar Boulevard. I know that, and you'll see how we got here. But we didn't just make this stuff. I mean, we made it up, but it's based on some real thought about how to do this, right? But one of the things you notice is that there are trees along the edge. There's an actual separated bike lane here, like a protected one. There's a little bit of grass and curb. There are literally parallel parked cars. There are 2 through lanes of traffic, not 3. Left turn lane still. But each lane of traffic, instead of being 12 feet wide, is only 11 feet wide, and the left turn lane is 10 feet wide. Because you don't need 12 feet of width unless you're going 45 miles an hour, which you don't want people doing in a town center. Right. So we also have buildings built up to not actually the back of the sidewalk. We have some additional setback there, but enough sidewalk here that I think we have somewhere in the neighborhood of 20 feet from the curb here to the building. And then we have the bike lane, and then we have other, right? We even have additional trees separating some of the parked cars, which will help to further enclose the space of the street. 2 different kinds of trees. These are shade trees, and these are more decorative trees. Next. How do we do this? Well, this was done by Gibson, and basically what you can see here without, maybe you can and can't, is they've taken all of this and they've shrunk it, narrowed it, and then gotten rid of the next, this 3rd lane. And then they said, but they kept right turn breakdown lanes at the intersections and provided even 2 lanes for left turns at Golden Springs. So there's always a right turn lane, which is where some of the traffic gets slowed, people turning right. And of course, provided more left turn capacity at Golden Springs. So that's how it's done. Now, what goes on in this additional space? Well, that's where we get the bike lane and those widened sidewalks and the parked cars. Next. So here is one of the diagrams about that. It's the 10-foot median. It's 2 travel lanes each way, and then the parked cars, then a protected bike lane, then the sidewalk. The only thing this doesn't have is, because we didn't tell them about this, is these additional trees between some of the parked cars, because that was a late addition. Next. So here it is now, again, this is just somewhere, next. And here is that same place as it might be, or from the ground as it might be. And, oh my God, could you imagine someone choosing to walk down Diamondbar Boulevard, choosing to sit at a cafe on Diamondbar Boulevard? But remember, we're not talking about what you know now. It's protected by buffers and bike lanes and trees and the like. And that's how you knit together the 2 sides of the street. Next. We have to think equally about Golden Springs Drive. This is a first pass. We haven't really put this into any further development, but it's on our list of things to do. But again, you see left turn lane, one travel lane each way, and parallel park, again, protected bike lanes. At Diamondbar, we'd probably have to go to 2 left turn lanes, because that's really where the big problem is. But the other issue with that intersection is that you have a lot of cut-through traffic. People coming from other places, navigating the whole 57, 60 craziness. New interchange, apparently, I'm told, is happening, soon to happen, in the works. Not sure the timing. Supposedly going to solve this. I don't know if it's going to solve it. I hope it solves it. We're going to bet that we think this will help solve it. But the other thing is, you know, if you want a town center, there's going to have to be some discussion about, do we just prioritize the car, or do we give pedestrians a chance as well, and accept that there's going to be some slowness at a couple of intersections sometimes of the day. Next. And I will tell you, every town I know that's pulled off this kind of stuff has accepted that issue. All right. So we've done about 3.5 plans. I say 1.5 because one of them is really a variation on the other. They are of all the same program, which is more or less what you saw in that market study. So there's no difference. It's not like we're, you know, oh, I like this one because it has more or less of something, right? What you're seeing is the differences here are about the street network and the public space network, and our thought about a new civic building. Now, again, no one has vetted what I'm about to say. No one. I mean, I've thrown it out there. No one's told me not to say it. But no one has said, oh, yeah, we're going to do this. So I don't want you to go back and say, oh, they're going to build a new city hall. But, you know, a city hall in a town center is not an illogical thing. This is a fine building. It is essentially an spec office building. It's fine. It serves well as an office building. But imagine a city hall that was actually purpose-built as a city hall in the town center. So what you see in blue in every one of these is, we're calling it a civic building because it could be something else. Who knows? Maybe there's somebody to support a live theater. Who knows? Maybe there's a new museum, you know, funded by somebody who's just made a lot of money and doing something. And there's always, you know, you'd always have an opportunity for a civic building somewhere. So what you see in this case is basically a main street kind of running, let's say, north-south, lined with retail, housing above. The stripes, yellow means residential, red means retail, stripes mean residential over retail, whereas pure red is just like a retail by itself. Purple is hotel, which is existing. The blue is a civic building. So what you see is kind of a, let's say, a Smart and Final, where it is lined with retail in a space, another big public space, sort of on this side. So it's kind of a swath of public space that ties together the two sides of the street with a set of pavilions inside it. The street itself comes over here, and then it wraps around a green. Same here, wraps around that green. Lined with retail, there's a stair over here, right, that gets you up the hill. Street comes over, it deflects to the civic building, right, and lined with residential here with a mixed-use building on this corner. This could be townhouses and apartments, more townhouses up there. Some of these are what we call wrap buildings. They're 4 stories wrapping around a garage, or they could be what we call podium buildings, just basically at 2 levels of concrete parking wrapped on the ground 2 floors with residential, and then residential above that. So, you know, that all gets you to density. The idea being you want townhouses, we have some walk-ups, and we have some flats, some apartments, one way or the other, as I just described it. Here's an example of a space somewhat like the one we're talking about. This happens to be called City Center. It's outside of Houston. It's actually not in the city center, but It's city center at the edge. But it's actually a very successful space. And the internal streets, some of them are they're paved with beautiful paving. So it's not just like you're on a street, but you're really in someplace special. This place is always active. It's a very suburban area around it. And yet, you can come here on a Thursday night in the spring or summer, fall. There are parents with kids playing on the grass. There's a band. It's incredibly buzzing, right? So it's amazingly successful. Next. Here's a scheme, we're calling it 2A. Now, 2A has a grander connection down the stairs, right? It actually makes this grand connection, this beautiful formal staircase. So thinking about the Spanish Steps that we just saw in Rome, coming all the way through. This is modeled after a space or street in Barcelona called Las Ramblas. It's essentially a street. It's a boulevard, except in the middle of the boulevard, instead of green, it's a set of plaza spaces with pavilions and restaurants and cafes. There are examples of Las Ramblas in the United States. They're not called that, but there are a lot of folks have done it. One of the most successful versions of it is at Santana Row up in San Jose. Again, a suburban area of San Jose. They made this amazing place. You've got 3 stories of residential over retail. You've got this center island, which is just buzzing with all kinds of, ruins that are actually constructed ruins, cafe seating. The cafes are sometimes serviced from storefronts, and they sort of run across the street to service them. It's great. Really slows traffic. You don't want to hit a waiter. So here's another view of that. So you've got that. The street now, the cross street, just runs into, let's say, the Smart and Final. Other stores exist here. There could still be a Sprouts in any of these that could be sitting under this parking here. So it could even terminate this axis. There's a connection, a public space here, colonnaded, and then a stair sequence that heads down. The folks who live in these apartments or condominiums can come up and use that, connect to it as well. It's not a street, it's just a stair. So one of the things you'll see is that in all these schemes, there are different responses to some of the existing smaller pad sites. These are the little buildings that already exist, like the McDonald's. It's still there. The couple of the gas stations. This is the water pumping station. It's still there, sort of working around that. Some of the schemes sort of assume they're gone. Some assume that they stay there. We don't know any of these folks that want to leave in the near term, so sure, they'll be there. We also don't think that this many gas stations in this area have a long-term viability. I just saw in the New York Times, there's an article today, or yesterday, California, of course, is phasing out gasoline cars, 2035. So that's only 13 years from now. So there'll be gas cars for a while after that, but within the life of this specific plan, there simply won't be a need for this many gas stations because there just won't be enough cars to fill them up or to use them. So, that's the reality. So we don't know which ones. So the idea is that these represent strategies, not necessarily specific solutions. You can go the next one. So, these buildings, these apartment buildings can have courtyards. These courtyards themselves can become really animated places. They're really lovely places to be. Next. Next.
I already did. That's the Civic now.
Oh, right. Okay. So, yes. In this one, the only difference between 2B, the one we just saw, and 2A, rather, the one we just saw in this one, is the Civic Building, or City Hall, if you will, moves to the center of the end of this axis. Instead of being out there where we now put residential, it's here. There are a few other additions. This is still a green here, another little village green right here. That's a little different, but this is the big difference, right? City Hall here or City Hall there. Next. This is the Chiwatts rendering of that space from above the staircase. As you can see, he imagined City Hall there. In this case, he kind of borrowed Pasadena's, but I think they would get their own. He also miniaturized Pasadena's, but one of the things that's so cool is that you get this view of the mountains when it's clear. And that's not something these other places have. And that's a special thing. And we just wanted to take advantage of that. So that's, all of these that have a connection would have a view like that. Question is, how wide do you want to make that? That's the question there. Next. So looking down, this is yet another one. This is this one has City Hall where the Smart and Final is. So yet another another opportunity to move City Hall around. So we've got like 3 cardinal points here, there, and up there. We now have just a main street here, not a sort of ramblas. There is a public space that exists alongside this main street, so it's a wide space. You can have things as a hotel, another hotel, like a boutique hotel there. City Hall itself sits around a square. This is a miniaturized Spanish plaza. So when the Spanish settled towns in the Western Hemisphere, they had a set of rules. They called them the laws of the Indies. They actually specified lots of things like block size and everything, but they specified a main square. And they had very precise dimensions for them, and they were typically colonnaded. And there are some that were built. There were a few in the United States. They didn't have the colonnades, but they were. Sonoma actually is a law of the Indies plan. But many in Central and South America. Well, this is not that size. This is a miniature size. So, but it's the idea of City Hall shares the space with the Smart and Final and other retailers, but they're all wrapped by this kind of colonnade, so they all come out and participate together. So that's just another idea. The other thing is that on this one, I think it's called Torito, comes in and it fronts the library on the side. So it actually has 2 kind of pieces that come together. The library here fronting a green, and then City Hall fronting another plaza that looks across to this main street over here. So another way to look at that. Can you go back to that slide that got out of order? It's way back. It was a Charrette rendering. I don't know how it got there. So this was a view of looking into a main street, from Diamondbar Boulevard, that cross street. Again, you see 3 stories over retail generally, or 4 stories if there's no retail. There might be more occasionally, but that's generally the average that we heard was acceptable. Again, the idea of a place that you feel comfortable walking, shopping. You are as important as the car. Next. Okay, now we can go back. Keep going. One more. That's it. So that's the last slide we have. That's what we've done so far in these first 2.5 days. So we've got more work to do. So I call this the middle of the beginning. And we would love to get your questions, comments. And if you have to leave at some point, I think we all at some point have to leave, you're welcome. And at any time, you are welcome to get up, make notes, draw things, whatever. You don't feel like you have to be like sitting here through all this. You can mill around. Okay, I'd like this to be, because if you have things to write or whatever, I want to hear them or see them or read them. I don't want you to be. So with that, let's turn the lights on. And any comments or questions? Yes, sir.
Oh, can you wait until the microphone's in your hand?
Oh, yes, sorry. You have to be mic'd when you.
Okay. Where would parking be provided, and how much parking would be provided?
Sure. Well, typically parking would be in the middle of the block, typically in a structure, a garage. Again, that would depend on. So I don't know the exact numbers of spaces, but we would basically look at the market study and provide the right amount of parking for residential, which could be anywhere from one per unit in affordable, it could be 2 per units, 2 in a townhouse or condo and something in between. As far as the retail goes, typical non-grocery store retail would probably be 4 per thousand. In Main Street situations where there is a park once solution, one of the reasons that there's so many cars per thousand is because people literally will drive from one end of a shopping center to the other. So, I mean, they can tar for every trip. But if you have a little Main Street area like this, you can make one trip, park your car, and do a lot of trips. So in a place like Santa Monica, okay, which some people claim is underparked, but I live there, I can find parking easily. It's 2 per thousand for the retail. That's typical of park once solutions. My guess is it'll wind up somewhere in between 4 and 2 as a practical matter, because it's expensive to build parking. You look like you might have done this before. I don't know. Are you in this business?
I'm in the retail business, and
Yeah.
parking is important.
Absolutely.
The problem that I see is, first of all, with the density of the housing, the density of the housing is good for business generally, but there's generally not enough parking.
Yeah.
So the residents are using the parking that are designed for the retail,
Sure.
and you're underparked there. With rents the way they are, and being in the retail business, you have to be very high volume in order to survive.
Yeah.
And
that's
you can't do high volume if you can't bring enough customers in.
Sure.
This is I love the concept, but Diamondbar is pretty hilly. There's a lot of residents around, but it's not a real high density
No, it isn't at all.
residents here.
Not at all.
And there's a lot of hills, and a lot of people would like to drive to the destination
Sure.
rather than walk to the destination.
I think most people will drive to. I agree with you. But once they're at the destination, the goal is to have them park one time and not drive around to other destinations. Like, I got to the McDonald's, I'm going to go here, I'm going to go there. Because each one of these is its own parking lot. So that's part of it. And that actually saves a lot of spaces.
Yeah.
So, and the answer is, quite frankly, we don't know yet. Because we don't know yet what the market is going to say about the parking requirement for this. So it is a balance between having enough parking and not making it so expensive that you can't afford to lease space there. This is what everybody deals with.
Thank you.
Anybody else?
This looks great. I think it's great to see some, continuation of urban design, urban planning going on in Diamondbar. Diamondbar was a series of subdivisions, commercial and industrial, that was developed in the county before incorporation. So we kind of inherited the environment, the physical environment in Diamondbar. And over the past several years, there's been a conscious effort to bring some rationale to the organization, the physical organization of the community through the general plan update process. And this was, as you mentioned, identified as a primary objective of the general plan update process to establish a downtown focal point, pedestrian-oriented, and an interesting and fun place to be, because there wasn't any in Diamondbar. I attended a few of the general plan sessions, and there were young people there, and a common comment was that Diamondbar is boring. And in fact, I heard somebody refer to it as Diamond Bore, but that was unfortunate. So I think there's a broad consensus for movement in this direction, to carry out the community planning of the general plan and do it in a conscious way. So I think we're headed in the right direction. I think from a housing standpoint, I lived in Diamondbar for 25 years. My wife and I bought our house here over 25 years ago, when a normal family could afford to buy a house in Diamondbar. No longer the case. I'm now an empty nester, and my nephew and his wife and their 5-year-old son live with me because they wouldn't be able to afford a house in Diamondbar. The 5-year-old is now 6-year-old, going on 6, is in school here. They would very much like to remain in the community. They love Diamondbar. They want to see their son grow up in school. They would very much be interested in being able to stake a claim in Diamondbar with some affordable housing that were, it was an interesting and good place to live in the future. So I think that the goals and objectives that you outlined here are in line with the general plan objectives, and I think we're making this would be a significant step forward to achieving the clear preferences of the community.
That's great. Well, speaking of puns, you said Diamond Bar. I don't know, you probably didn't notice that, but this is the Diamond Bar and Grill. Anyway, other comments or questions? Yes, sir.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. That's very helpful. I have a question regarding traffic on Diamondbar Boulevard. During rush hour, traffic is very heavy now.
Yeah.
With the addition of the town center, what are your thoughts on how do we mitigate that?
The thoughts are that we're adding essentially residential density, but not commercial density. And residential density is not the driver of the traffic. Okay, I'm going to say that again because it didn't exist. My thoughts are that we're adding residential density and not commercial density. Residential density is simply not driving the traffic at all. It's a fly speck. The vast majority of the traffic here is through traffic. It's not even related to this. So adding the residential density is not going to have any appreciable difference. In fact, there are going to be people who can now walk to things that they formerly had to drive to because they live there. And in fact, some of these people are going to be working from home a lot because that's the nature of work these days, particularly some of the people who are going to be living in a place like this because they're in hybrid things and they come 2 days a week, they come to 3 days a week. I wish I could get people that work with me to come in more, but they don't. So I have to live with that. That's the way it is everywhere. My son works for a company, he goes in 1 day a week. So I think the residential density is going to be like a gnat's hair of the total traffic. And as I said, the issue is the intersections. It's not the, right? And so that's the other thing. So a lot of it is related to the school itself. And it's turning movements on Golden Spring and Diamondbar. And we've got the data, we've got it at rush hour. We know precisely what's working and what's not. And that's how we know that the capacity is in excess. And we also know, because the models are out there, that residential density simply doesn't cause the traffic. Even though the old models were calculated in a way that, they used to have these old models where every new house equaled 10 car trips. And every new apartment was like, 8 or 9. It was like ridiculous. And, it just doesn't work that way.
All right. Thank you. That's good.
I can have people who know better than me talk the next time, because I'm not the traffic guy. Oh, you have a traffic guy who tells me this all the time. So, yeah. Oh my God. Well, some of you heard all this before, so you don't have any questions because you heard them all last time. But you have just seen new drawings. I would encourage you, I plead with you to go look at these. If you like one of them better, say that. If you don't like one of them better, say that. That's the only way we know. And part of this process is that we don't just come to you with a finished plan. And we literally came on Monday with nothing. And everybody says, well, you probably did stuff. No, we actually didn't. We do that by design. We strategize. We talk about what the things are, but we don't. We want to hear from you. So if we don't comment, then we're not hearing from you. Look forward to that. Okay. Well, we'll be here all week.